This is an 18-page endurance extended auto warranty contract. Pretty exciting, right? But hidden in the details of this vehicle service contract is the language that could save you thousands of dollars or leave you holding the bill on that very same repair because you missed one small detail. So that's why I printed out this whole contract so that you and I can go through section by section to give you the mental model to understand what to look for in these contracts. Each one is slightly different, but I'll try and give you an idea of the language to look out for and which details to pick up on. By the way, I'm Chris with Consumer Affairs. I am very much not a lawyer, so don't take anything here as legal advice. But I'm also not a salesman, so I'm not going to try and sell you on an auto warranty. Instead, I've done the research to give you a neutral walkthrough of the terms and conditions you might see in a vehicle service contract. Because at the end of the day, I want you to feel confident in whatever decision you make. I'll be going through the sample version of Endurance's Advantage Vehicle Service Contract, more commonly known as their extended auto warranty. And again, this is the Advantage package, so it's a little more expensive than their base package. For now, we're going to start at the beginning, on the application page. The application page has three important components to understand. The top part is basically your information about yourself and the vehicle. The important thing here is just to make sure that you input that information accurately. Next up are additional coverage options, which we'll get to later. Each one will probably cost you a bit more. The important one to note here is if you plan on doing any Uber driving, you would have to mark off the commercial box. Following that up is actually the information about when your plan starts and how long it lasts. While the rest of the contract will basically explain that section in way more detail, the important part to note here is the waiting period. Your contract doesn't actually kick in until the waiting period's over, which is typically some amount of miles and some time. So you can't, for example, just sign up for a warranty and go to the repair shop the next day. The other box to pay attention to here is the deductible amount, which we'll come to later, but is the amount you have to pay for any repair as a baseline. Lastly, that last section confirms that you've read the rest of the document. So by the time you've filled out the application page, they're expecting you to have read everything. Keep that in mind. Pages 2 and 3 mostly cover definitions, and that seems like a boring part of an already boring document, and it is. But those definitions will come to define exactly what you're getting in this coverage. The one that I like to point out here is licensed repair shop. That will indicate in most contracts where you can actually get your repairs done. Another important definition here is pre-existing condition. We'll go into more detail about that later, but it's important to read that definition in whatever contract you're looking at. And lastly, verifiable documents are going to be really important here. Understanding what is and isn't a verifiable document per the contract will make a big difference when it comes to actually claiming a repair and how you go about doing that. Next up is the scope of the agreement. This is going to go through the actual people and companies involved in this transaction and what they will and won't cover. It'll refer to what vehicles are eligible for this coverage in the first place, how you can go about getting repairs done, and talk about any additional details like coverage periods and waiting periods. One important clause here to potentially look at is ineligible vehicles. In this particular case, it talks about salvaged vehicles or lemons and the use of vehicles for commercial use. In whatever contract you're signing, take a look there to make sure that your car isn't ineligible for some odd reason. Section 4, your responsibilities, is when it starts to put the onus on you to proactively take care of your vehicle. So it's important to understand what's going on here. The first section they have in their contract is duty to provide accurate information. Now this again might be different in other contracts, but the concept here is that whatever you put in your application has to be accurate. If you lied or falsified any information, they're not going to cover you in any future claim. The second is a duty to maintain your vehicle and records. And again, this is going to be different per the contract, but the general idea here is the same. They're expecting you to do the required maintenance on the required schedule as outlined in your owner's manual. Plus, they need you to keep the receipts. So what that means is you have to get your oil changed when the manufacturer recommends you get your oil change. It also means that if you have any other maintenance repairs that are required per the owner's manual, you need to get those done. Or when a claim does arise in the future, they're not going to cover it. But each time you get maintenance on the car, you have to save the record. And ideally, it's some kind of electronic receipt that's on the company's letterhead. If for some reason you decide to do your own maintenance per the owner's manual, you will have to keep receipts for both the parts and get some witness or some verifiable proof that you did the work. Again, I'm not a lawyer and I don't know exactly how to do that, but that's the general gist of it. And lastly, there's duty to cooperate, which just means that you're going to actually work with them and give them all the documents they need whenever a claim arises. Which leads us to actually filing a claim. It's spelled out in the document exactly how they expect you to file a claim in the future. Not following this process is grounds for denying the claim. So let's jump into it. While every service contract is different, this one starts out with prevent future damage. What that means is if you hear a sound start to happen or you see a light turn on in your gauge, you have to go to the repair shop. You can't keep driving through it. While you typically might push off, that squeaky engine for a couple days, you cannot do it under this agreement. Next, in this particular case, you have to take your vehicle to a licensed repair facility. In this particular case, the licensed repair facility is any facility that has a certificate from the state licensure. Other contracts may have a particular set of repair shops you're required to go to. For example, a dealership warranty might require you to come back to the dealership. Next up, they want you to provide the licensed repair shop with a copy of your contract. I'd recommend saving it to your phone, and that way you could always just send the file to the repair shop if you ever need it. Now here's the big one, which I've seen across many of these contracts that I've read and is clearly stated here. You need to obtain prior authorization for the repair. There are some exceptions, which we're going to talk about in like 1 second, but the general idea is if it's not an emergency, you need to call the plant administrator and confirm that they'll actually cover whatever it is that you're going to get repaired. The key being call before the repair. Next up is authorized teardown, and this one is a little bit tricky. The idea here is if the administrator believes that the repairman needs to go and tear down some part of the component or the vehicle to figure out what's wrong, in the instance where the eventual repair isn't covered by the claim, you're going to have to pay for the teardown. This is language that's unique to this particular contract, but look out for something similar. But before the repairman does anything, review what they are planning on doing with them before they take action. Next up is paying the deductible, and I mentioned this in the application page. The idea being here, you're going to have to pay some base amount for any repair that occurs, but then the service contract should cover the repair. Lastly is emergency repairs. Emergency repairs in this particular instance are when the car is inoperable or unsafe to drive and the administrator office is closed. So in some hypothetical instance, let's say it's Christmas and the office is closed and your car breaks down and you need to get to wherever you're going, you could bring it to a licensed repair shop, have them do the work, and then file a claim within 5 days of that work happening. Now that's the language of this contract and it might not extend to all contracts. But you are definitely going to be taking a risk here that whatever ended up happening isn't actually covered, and because you didn't get that prior authorization that we mentioned a second ago, they might not cover it. Now that you have all of that background on how to file a claim, we can actually go into what is covered. And again, this will be different in every contract. The first little bit here goes over how much they'll actually pay for the repairs. They're going to use an MSRP for the required parts. So basically like what is an average part cost and what is the average labor rate in that area. They are reinforcing the idea here in part B that you need to get pre-authorization for whatever repairs you're going to get done, and it has to again be at a licensed repair shop. And then part C actually goes through all the parts that are covered. Now this part's really important to read and understand ahead of time. I'm not going to go through all the parts covered here. This is the Advantage plan, so it covers a whole heck of a lot, but you do need to read this part. If you want to know what's covered in your agreement, this is what it is. And then the other really important thing to look at here is the limited liability. The vehicle service contract isn't going to cover you for an infinite amount of dollars. There's usually some limit that the agreement sets. In this case, it's got a limit of liability of $10,000 or the trade-in value of your car based on J.D. Power. I like how they named J.D. Power or some surviving entity that's similar, but the idea being a generally acknowledged trade-in value for your car. Next up is exclusions, and this is probably the most important part of the contract for you going into it. The exclusion list is typically long and lists out a lot of parts and nuance. I can't go through all of them, but I will hit on the important ones. The first one is just in section 1, where it says anything that's not mentioned in the coverage section isn't covered. So you have to keep that in mind. It's pretty straightforward, but some people assume something will be, and it just isn't. Next up is prior authorization. They are harping on this throughout the whole thing, and most contracts do this. You're gonna need to make sure that this thing is covered before you get the repair. Part C here talks about the regular maintenance based on the owner's manual. Most contracts will just have like the language here where it says it won't cover that basic maintenance, but you are required to keep verified receipts of all that work that's done, going back to that earlier section we talked about. Next up is like the literal list of everything that they're not covering, so keep that in mind. That's again going to be unique to your contract. But then the next part's actually pretty interesting too. If one of those parts that's ineligible breaks and breaks one of your eligible parts, so like that chain of reaction, they're not going to cover the eligible part either. So you have to make sure that your car is in good working condition, because if an ineligible part breaks, it could end up breaking an eligible part, but they're going to deny that claim. Also note that this isn't car insurance, so you're not going to be covered if you're in an accident. They also won't cover any faulty or negligent repair work, so if the repair shop does something wrong, they're not going to back you up. They won't cover pre-existing conditions. They put this in giant, bold writing in most of the contracts that I've seen. And pre-existing condition is anything that's wrong with your vehicle before you sign the contract and during the waiting period. So keep that in mind. If something's already broken when you sign the contract, they're not going to cover it. This contract mentions not servicing any vehicle outside of the United States or Canada, so don't drive to Mexico in this particular instance. But again, there's a lot of verbiage here I'm not covering, and I'm not a lawyer. This is a really important section of the document, so if you're uncomfortable with understanding any part of it, I would recommend making yourself comfortable. The next several sections are important to understand for legal reasons, but I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I can't really add a lot of value. I suggest reading them, and again, if you have questions, going to some other party for more specific advice. And that's it. That's a general walkthrough of a sample endurance vehicle service contract, also known as an extended warranty. The goal of this video was to give you a mental model to understand which parts of the contract to take special interest in, but I recommend you read the whole thing. If something's unclear, try and make it clear to yourself via either tools on the internet or talking to a lawyer if you need to. It's better to make an informed decision now than be surprised by an unexpected denial of claim in the future. And that's the biggest problem most people have with extended auto warranties, is eventually getting a claim denied. So avoid yourself that hassle, make yourself feel confident one way or the other, and decide whether or not an extended auto warranty is right for you. And again, I'm Chris Kolmar with Consumer Affairs. Consumer Affairs is a website that uses verified reviews from real customers to help you with life's unique buying decisions. We make big purchases, no big deal.